The alarms screamed through the Kethmoran monitoring station like angry metal birds. Commander Veltar lifted his scaled head from his work desk, his 4 eyes blinking in annoyance. The sound meant only one thing. Something had entered there. Space without permission. "Report?" he barked at the junior officer who ran toward him. "Sir, we have detected a ship in Sector 7 Alpha. It does not match any known design in our database." Veltar stood up, his tall frame casting a shadow over the smaller alien. The Kethmoran Empire had ruled this part of the galaxy for 3,000 years. Nothing moved through their space without their knowledge. Nothing. "Impossible," he said. Walking to the main screen, "Show me." The display flickered to life, showing a grainy image of a ship floating in the darkness of space. Veltar stared at it, his mind trying to understand what he was seeing. The vessel looked wrong somehow. It was too rough, too simple, like someone had built it with spare parts and hope. "This is what set off our alarms?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "The ship appears to be drifting. Its energy readings are strange." Veltar looked closer at the readings. The ship's power source was primitive, basic fusion drives that most civilized species had stopped using centuries ago. Its shields were weak. Its weapons looked like something from a museum. "Probably smugglers," he said with a wave of his clawed hand. "Or pirates using an old cargo hauler. Send a patrol ship to investigate. Tell them to be careful. Desperate criminals can be dangerous." On the other side of the galaxy, far from the monitoring station, Captain Jinha stood on the bridge of the used Defiant Dawn. His dark eyes stared at the screens showing empty space around them. But Jinha knew better than to trust what he could see. Out there, hidden in the darkness, something was waiting. "Harin, what's the status on our modified sensors?" he asked without turning around. Harin looked up from her engineering station, pushing a strand of black hair from her face. Her hands were stained with grease and her uniform had seen better days, but her eyes were sharp and focused. "Still picking up traces of the energy signature we've been following," she said. "Whatever those things are, they were here recently?" "Very recently," Jinha nodded. The Devourers had left a trail across 3 star systems, dead worlds, empty colonies. Entire civilizations that had simply vanished overnight. The Earth Defense Force had sent the Defiant Dawn to track them down, but so far they had only found evidence of their passing. "Captain," called out Quan from the weapons station. "We have company." On the main screen, a sleek ship appeared, moving toward them with obvious purpose. It was beautiful in the way that only advanced technology could be. Smooth lines, perfect angles, and a hull that seemed to bend light around it. "Kethmoran design," Harin said, checking her database. "Patrol class. Fast, well-armed, and they probably think we're easy prey." Jinha almost smiled, almost put me through to them. The communication system crackled to life, and an alien voice filled the bridge. The translator made it sound mechanical and cold. "Unknown vessel, you are in violation of Imperial space. Shut down your engines and prepare to be boarded." Jinha walked to the center of his bridge, looking at the alien ship on the screen. These Kethmorans had no idea what was coming for their galaxy. They lived in their perfect ships, in their perfect empire, thinking they were safe from the horrors that lurked between the stars. "This is Captain Jinha of the Earth vessel Defiant Dawn," he said calmly. "We're tracking a serious threat to this sector. I suggest you move along and let us do our job." There was silence from the other ship. Then the alien voice came back, and this time it sounded angry. "Earth vessel, there is no such classification in our records. You will surrender immediately, or we will open fire." Quan looked at Jinha, his hand moving toward the weapons controls. Harin was already working at her station, her fingers dancing over the controls as she prepared their defenses. "Captain," she said quietly, "their ship is more advanced than ours in every way. Better shields, better weapons, better everything? On paper, we don't stand a chance," Jinha nodded. "Good thing we don't fight on paper." The Kethmoran ship moved closer, its weapons powering up. On their bridge, Sub-Commander Theises was getting impatient. This primitive vessel should have surrendered. By now, instead, They were just floating there, as if they had no fear of the Empire's might. "Sir," his weapons officer said, "their ship is doing something strange. The energy readings are changing." Vyses looked at his screen. The human ship's power signature was shifting, moving in ways that made no sense. It was as if they were rebuilding their entire power grid while he watched. "Impossible," he said. "No ship can modify its systems that quickly." On the Defiant Dawn, Harin was doing exactly that. Her hands flew over her controls, rerouting power, adjusting shield frequencies, and preparing surprises that would make the Kethmorans question everything they thought they knew about space combat. "Ready when you are, Captain," she said. Jinha looked at the alien ship one more time. Soon, the Kethmoran Empire would learn something important about humans. They would learn that when humanity sets its mind to something, the universe itself has to step aside. Harin, show them what human engineering looks like. Quan, let them know we're not going quietly. The Defiant Dawn came alive with a fire that burned hotter than stars. And in that moment, everything changed. The galaxy was about to remember why humans were dangerous. Sub-Commander Vyses had never seen anything like it. The human ship moved in ways that broke every rule of space combat he had learned in 30 years of service. It should have been impossible. "Sir, they're using their engines as weapons." His tactical officer shouted over the noise of alarms. Vyses watched in horror as the primitive vessel spun around and fired its main thruster directly at his ship. The blast of superheated plasma struck their forward shields and sent them spinning. "Out of control. Stabilize," he ordered, gripping his command chair. "How did they do that?" Nobody answered because nobody knew. The human ship had just turned basic physics into a weapon, and it was working on the bridge of the Defiant Dawn. Captain Jinha stood calmly while chaos erupted around the alien vessel. His crew worked with the smooth efficiency of people who had faced impossible odds before and won. "Harin, status report," he said. "Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons and deflect projectiles," Harin called out from her station. "But they're not built to handle direct thermal shock from a fusion drive." "I'm reading major power fluctuations across their hull." Quan smiled grimly at his weapons console. "Captain, their weapon systems are trying to lock onto us, but they can't predict our movement patterns." "I don't think they've ever fought anyone who uses random maneuvers." "That's because most civilized species fight in predictable ways," Jinha replied. "They follow rules. We make our own." The Kethmoran ship fired its main guns, sending brilliant beams of energy toward the Defiant Dawn. The shots should have destroyed the human vessel instantly. Instead, they watched in disbelief as the primitive ship seemed to dance between the beams. "Impossible!" Vyses roared. "No ship can move like that." He was wrong. The Defiant Dawn could move like that because Harin had done something no Kethmoran engineer would ever think to try. She had disconnected the ship's safety systems and was manually controlling every thruster on the hull. The ship bucked and rolled like a wild animal, but it stayed in one piece. "Harin, you're pushing the hull beyond its limits," Jinha warned. "No, Captain," she replied, sweat beading on her forehead. "But sometimes you have to break things to make them work better." The alien ship fired again, this time with multiple weapons. The energy beams crossed the space where the Defiant Dawn had been a second before, hitting nothing but empty vacuum. Quan had been studying the enemy ship's movements, learning its patterns. Now he was ready to strike back. "Captain, requesting permission to return fire," he said. "Granted, show them what human weapons can do." The Defiant Dawn's guns were simple kinetic cannons that fired chunks of metal at very high speeds. Compared to the Kethmoran energy weapons, they looked like toys. But Quan had learned something during his years in the Earth military. Sometimes the simplest weapons were the most effective. The metal projectiles struck the alien ship's shields and should have bounced off harmlessly. Instead, they punched through like the shields weren't even there. "What?" Vyses stared at his damage reports. "How did their primitive weapons penetrate our shields?" His chief engineer was frantically checking the readings. "Sir, their projectiles are spinning. They're creating a drill effect that our shields can't compensate for." And they're using different metals, some magnetic, some not. Our shields don't know how to react. Thizes felt his blood turn cold. These humans were fighting like savages, but they were winning like generals. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving another transmission from the human ship. Put it through." Captain Jinha's calm voice filled the bridge. "Kethmoran vessel, this is your final warning. Withdraw from this area immediately. We have work to do, and you're in the way." Thizes couldn't believe what he was hearing. A primitive species was ordering him to retreat? The Kethmoran Empire didn't retreat from anyone. "Human vessel, you are vastly outnumbered. We have called for reinforcements. Surrender now, and we will show mercy." There was a pause. Then Jinha spoke again, and this time there was something in his voice that made Tice's scales crawl. "Sub-Commander, you have no idea what you're dealing with. We're not pirates or smugglers, we're hunters. And right now, we're hunting something that makes your worst nightmares look like bedtime stories. So I'll ask you one more time. Get out of our way." On the Defiant Dawn, Harin was working frantically at her station. The ship's sensors had picked up something that made her heart race with fear. "Captain," she said urgently, "I'm detecting movement in the asteroid field. Multiple contacts, moving in formation." Jinha's expression darkened. "Devourers? Has to be. The energy signatures match what we've been tracking." Juan checked his weapons. "How many?" "At least 6. Maybe more hiding behind the larger asteroids." Jinha looked at the alien ship still hovering nearby, its crew probably thinking they were winning this fight. They had no idea what was about to happen. "Harin, open a channel to the Kethmoran ship, all frequencies." "Channel open, Captain. Sub-Commander Thizes, this is Captain Jinha. In about 30 seconds, your ship is going to be attacked by creatures that have destroyed entire civilizations. Your energy weapons won't work against them. Your shields won't stop them. Your speed won't save you. The only chance you have is to follow our lead and do exactly what we tell you." Thizes laughed bitterly. "You expect me to believe that convenient story? You're trying to escape." "I'm trying to save your life," Jinha replied. "But if you want to fight them alone, that's your choice." The asteroid field suddenly erupted with movement. Dark shapes poured out from between the rocks, moving with impossible grace through the vacuum of space. They were alive, but not in any way that made sense. They absorbed light, bent space around them, and radiated hunger like heat from a star. The Devourers had found them. And for the first time in his life, Sub-Commander Thizes understood what true fear felt like. The first Devourer hit the Kethmoran ship like a nightmare made real. "Sub-Commander." Thizes watched in horror as the dark creature wrapped itself around his vessel's hull. It had no solid form. One moment it looked like living shadow, the next like twisted metal with too many teeth. But its hunger was real. The ship's energy readings dropped as the creature began feeding on their power core. "Weapons fire!" Thizes screamed. "All batteries. Target that thing." Energy beams lanced out from the Kethmoran ship, striking the Devourer directly. The creature absorbed every shot like a sponge soaking up water. Instead of being hurt, it seemed to grow larger. "Sir, it's eating our weapons fire," the tactical officer reported in panic. "Our attacks are making it stronger." Thizes felt his world crumble. Everything he knew about warfare was useless against these things. But then he heard the human captain's voice over the communication channel. "Stop feeding it energy," Jinha shouted. "Switch to physical attacks only." "But our kinetic weapons are for close defense only," Thizes replied. "They're not powerful enough." "Then get creative. Use debris, use your ship's mass, use anything that isn't energy-based." On the Defiant Dawn, Captain Jinha was dealing with 3 Devourers at once. But his crew worked like they had been fighting these monsters their whole lives. "Harin, reroute power to the magnetic grapplers," he ordered. "Captain, the grapplers are for cargo handling." "They're not weapons," Harin protested. "They are now." "Quan, load the forward tubes with metal scrap. Anything heavy." Quan's fingers flew over his controls. "Sir, we're basically turning our ship into a giant slingshot." "Sometimes the simplest ideas work best," Jinha replied. Harin engaged the magnetic grapplers and grabbed a chunk of asteroid debris twice the size of their ship. The defiant Dawn groaned under the strain, but the human engineering held. Now! Jinha commanded. Harin released the magnetic field while simultaneously firing the ship's thrusters. The massive rock flew toward the nearest devourer at incredible speed. When it hit, the creature let out a sound that made reality itself seem. Tio scream, "It worked!" Quan shouted. The physical impact hurt it. But there was no time to celebrate. More devourers were emerging from the asteroid field, and they looked angry. Sub-Commander Thizes tried to copy the human tactics, using his ship's tractor beam to throw asteroids at the creature attached to his hull. It worked, but barely. The devourer loosened its grip, but didn't retreat. "Human ship," he called desperately. "We need help." "Working on it," Jinha replied. "Harin, can you modify their shield frequency?" Harin was already typing frantically at her console. "I can try, but I need access to their ship systems." "Kethmoran vessel, we need you to lower your shields and let us link our computers." Thizes couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Lower our shields? In the middle of a battle?" "Trust me," Jinha said. "We've been fighting these things longer than you've known they existed." It went against every rule in the Imperial Handbook, but Thizes had run out of options. "Do it." Harin's hands moved like lightning across her controls. Within seconds, she had accessed the Kethmoran ship systems and was making changes that no alien engineer would ever think possible. "There," she said. "I've reversed their shield polarity and added a rotating frequency modulation. The Devourers won't be able to drain their power now." The creature on the Kethmoran ship suddenly recoiled as if burned. It released its grip and floated away, looking confused and angry. "Impossible," Thizes whispered. "You modified our shields in under a minute. Our best engineers would need days to make those changes." "Human engineering is different," Harin replied simply. "We don't follow the rules because we don't know what they are." Quan had been tracking the remaining Devourers and noticed something important. "Captain, they're not attacking randomly. They're herding us toward the center of the asteroid field." Jinha studied the tactical display. Quan was right. The creatures were using coordinated tactics, driving both ships deeper into the maze of floating rocks. "It's a trap," he realized. "There's something in there they want us to find." Or something. "They're protecting." Harin added grimly. Sub-Commander Thizes was beginning to understand why the humans had been hunting these creatures. They weren't just monsters. They were intelligent monsters with a plan. "Human captain," he said. "My ship's sensors are detecting a massive energy source at the center of the field." "It's unlike anything in our databases," Jinha nodded. "That's probably their nest, or their ship, or something worse." "What do?" "We do what humans always do," Jinha replied. "We go toward the danger instead of away from it." Harin looked up from her station. "Captain, are you sure about this?" "We don't know what's waiting for us in there." "That's exactly why we have to find out," Jinha said. "These things have destroyed entire worlds. If we don't stop them here, they'll just move on to the next system." Thizes felt a chill run through his body. "The next system? That would be Kethmer Prime, our homeworld." "Then you understand why we can't run," Jinha said. "Quan, plot a course for the center of the field. Harin, prepare for anything." "What about the Devourers?" Thizes asked. Jinha smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Let them follow us. It's time they learned what happens when humans stop running and start hunting." The two ships moved deeper into the asteroid field, followed by creatures older than most civilizations. Behind them, space itself seemed to hold its breath. At the center of the field, something vast and ancient was waiting. Something that had devoured worlds and civilizations for millions of years, but it had never faced humans before, and that was going to make all the difference. At the center of the asteroid field waited something that should not exist. "Captain." Jinha stared at the massive structure on his main screen and felt his breath catch in his throat. It was part ship, part living creature, and part something else that his mind couldn't understand. The thing was easily 10 times larger than both their ships combined, with surfaces that shifted between metal and flesh. "By the void," Sub-Commander Theises whispered over the communication channel. "What is that thing?" "That," Jinha said grimly, "is what destroyed the Terran colonies in the Outer Rim, what wiped out the research station on Kepler 442, what turned 3 entire star systems into graveyards." Haran was scanning the massive entity with every sensor the Defiant Dawn possessed. "Captain, it's not just a ship, it's alive. And it's been here for a very long time. I'm reading energy signatures that suggest it's been feeding on this entire asteroid field for centuries." "Feeding on rocks?" Theises asked. "Not rocks," Quan said, checking his tactical display. "The asteroids aren't natural. They're the remains of ships, thousands of them." The horrible truth hit Theises like a physical blow. This wasn't an asteroid field at all, it was a graveyard. Every floating chunk of rock and metal had once been a starship, crushed and consumed by the ancient horror before them. "How many civilizations?" Theises asked in a whisper. "We stopped counting after 50, Jinha replied. "This thing is old, Sub-Commander, older than your empire, older than most species in the galaxy. It's been eating its way across space since before our worlds had names." The massive creature began to move, turning what might have been ahead toward their ships. Smaller devourers emerged from its surface like antibodies responding to an infection. "It knows we're here," Harin reported. "And it's not happy about visitors." Jinha walked to the center of his bridge, his mind racing through possibilities. Every conventional weapon had failed against these creatures. Every standard tactic had been useless. But humans had one advantage that no other species possessed. They were too stubborn to know when they were beaten. "Haran, can you get me a direct scan of that thing's core?" "Working on it, Captain." Her fingers danced across her controls. "They're ... I'm reading a massive energy buildup at its center. It's like a star, but artificial. That's how it powers itself." "And if that artificial star went out?" Haran looked up at him with wide eyes. "The whole thing would collapse." "But Captain, there's no way to get close enough. The energy levels would kill us long before we could do any damage." Jinha smiled. It was the same smile he'd worn when the Earth Defense Force had told him his mission was impossible. When they'd said no one could track the Devourers across interstellar space. When they'd warned him that his ship wasn't strong enough for what lay ahead. "Quan, what's our ammunition status?" "We've got 1 nuclear torpedo left, sir. Been saving it for emergencies." "I'd say this qualifies." Jinha turned to the communication console. "Sub-Commander Theises, are you willing to try something that will either save the galaxy or get us all killed?" There was a long pause. Then Tice's voice came back, steady despite everything they'd witnessed. "Human Captain, after what I've seen today, I'm beginning to think your species specializes in impossible things. What do you need?" "We need you to be the distraction while we make a suicide run at that creature's core." "Suicide run?" Theises repeated. "Haran's going to overload our fusion reactor and ram it straight into that artificial star. The explosion should be enough to destabilize the whole structure." Haran turned to stare at her captain. "Sir, that plan has several major flaws. Starting with the fact that we'll all be dead." "Not if we do it right," Jinha replied. "We set up a remote detonation, launch ourselves clear in the escape pods, and hope we're far enough away when it blows." Quan was already running calculations. "Captain, the escape pods don't have enough range. Even if we launch at maximum distance, the explosion will catch us." Jinha nodded. He'd known that from the beginning. But sometimes doing the right thing meant accepting the consequences. "Then we make sure it counts," he said simply, over the communication channel. Sub-Commander Theises was having a heated discussion with his crew. Finally, his voice came back. "Human Captain, my crew has volunteered to assist in your plan, but we have a better idea. Our ship has more powerful engines than yours. We'll make the ramming run while you provide covering fire." "Sub-Commander, that's not necessary. This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is," Theises replied firmly. This creature has been feeding on the galaxy for millions of years. It's destroyed countless civilizations, including some we considered friends. And today I watched a primitive human ship do things that our most advanced engineers said were impossible. If you can fight these monsters with fusion drives and metal bullets, then we can die beside you with honor. Jinha felt something tighten in his chest. Sub-Commander ... Captain Jinha, Thaises interrupted. It has been an honor to witness what humans are truly capable of. Your species doesn't just survive the impossible, you make it look easy. When this is over, the galaxy will remember that. Haran was already working on the modifications they would need. Captain, I can rig both ships to work together. Link our reactors to their engine core. The combined explosion will be 10 times more powerful. Do it, Jinha ordered. The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity. Haran connected systems that were never meant to work together. Quan coordinated targeting solutions with the Kethmoran weapons officer. Jinha and Thaises planned their final attack run. The ancient creature seemed to sense what they were planning. More devourers poured from its surface, racing toward the 2 small ships that dared to challenge something older than worlds. All systems ready, Haran reported. Then let's finish this, Jinha said. All ships, attack run. Show this thing what happens when humans decide they've had enough. The Defiant Dawn and the Stellar Claw accelerated toward the massive creature, their combined engines burning like twin stars against the darkness. Behind them, the smaller devourers gave chase, but they were too late. For Earth, Jinha shouted. For the Empire. Thaises replied, for everyone who never got the chance to fight back. Haran added, the 2 ships struck the creature's core at exactly the same moment. For an instant, a new star was born in the heart of the asteroid field. The explosion tore through space, consuming the ancient horror and its spawn in a wave of cleansing fire. When the light faded, the graveyard of ships was gone. In its place floated empty space and the fading traces of something that had terrorized the galaxy for eons. 2 small objects drifted in the aftermath. Emergency beacons from escape pods that had launched at the last possible second. Inside the pods, human and Kethmoran survivors floated unconscious but alive, carried to safety by the shockwave of their own victory. When they woke up 3 days later, rescued by Kethmoran search ships, Sub-Commander Thaises would send a message to the Imperial capital that would change everything. The message was simple. The humans are not our enemies, they are our salvation. And the galaxy needs to remember their name. Captain Jinha, when he recovered, would send his own message to Earth Defense Command. Mission accomplished. The Devourers are finished. Recommend we start teaching other species how to fight impossible odds. They're eager students. But that would come later. For now, the galaxy was a little bit safer and the darkness had learned something important. When humans decide something needs to die, the universe itself gets out of the way.